I kind of immersed myself into this, knowing about climate change, but I felt like someone else is going to figure it all out. I was working on my own personal carbon footprint and growing my own food and trying to live a low carbon lifestyle. And well, besides the burnout of the gardening, I felt like, wow, I need to really catch up on where we are with climate change. So I started doing some continuing education, and the climate science that I was learning about was just totally alarming to me, realizing that nobody's in control. We don't have somebody that's going to figure it out for us. And so it kind of took over my life because I felt like the real issues have to come from, while a lot of amazing things going on in communities, there has to be the type of initiatives going on the policy level. And so I'm going to just flip through the slides super quick because I've got to cut out a bit. I thought I had 20 minutes. So let's see if that's going to work. Okay, there we go. Just as far as the peace issue, I'm sure that all of you are well aware that climate change is a huge issue for the humanitarian crises we see around the world. Severe droughts and so on are displacing millions of people. Unrest is resulting from a lot of this. And it's just going to get way, way worse if we don't find ways to reduce our emissions. And maybe you're aware of the studies that say by mid-century we could have hundreds of millions of refugees displaced from rising sea levels, droughts, storms, floods, and probably things that we don't even know about. And the thing is, when I hear these numbers, hundreds of millions, what does that actually mean? And I just like to pause for a minute and reflect that that's every one of those are individuals like us who have families and hopes and dreams for the future, and it's not okay to just say that's the way we're going. And I'm not going to dwell on the science here, but we're heading the business as usual pathway that we're on, which sounds all nice and comforting. Business as usual, I'll feel good about that. But this is like a suicide path, and we're heading that way. And we're doing a planetary experiment of unprecedented proportions, besides sometimes in geological past when some huge planetary disruptions happened, like an asteroid or huge volcanic eruptions. We don't really know what this 4 to 6 degrees warming by the end of the century, which is projected, it would mean, except for that we do know that it's not going to be the same world that we're in today. And it's not really even very long till the end of the century, as I was just reflecting that somebody born today is going to be 84 by the end of the century. And I was at the market the other day with some postcards for this campaign we're doing, and I was talking to this woman about it, trying to find ways to connect. And when I told her this, she's like, I'm 84 years old. And she's like, give me one of those postcards. It really does just give you a pause. It's not like this is in our distant future, and it's happening now, and it could just be catastrophic. And just another little aside, 4 degrees going the other way, cooling. This area was under kilometers of ice in the middle of the ice age. So what's 4 degrees the other way? There's tipping points in the system. I'm sorry, I can go on and on. I'm supposed to get this brief. But anyhow, what's going on? We've got crazy stuff happening. The polarization, especially in the U.S., is really quite large with climate inaction. There's a lot of reasons for this, a lot of special interests, a lot of money getting into politics and the media. In Canada, it's a little more subtle, less theatrical than in the U.S., perhaps. We had a decade of Stephen Harper spouting job-killing carbon tax and inaction on climate change. We have the new Prime Minister who has promised a Canadian plan for addressing climate change, and that's very exciting. But we promised the plan by 90 days after the Paris talks, and now we're quite a bit further along. The plan's now been delayed until at least the end of November. But there is an opportunity, but at the same time, special interests are getting in there and saying we want to build pipelines and other large infrastructure projects that would mean a lot of emissions in the future. So how can we, and I just wanted to acknowledge as well, I really loved Wob's talk last night. It was really powerful and moving. And he was talking about whether change can happen from within or whether it's only going to come from the outside, and I agree with him that it takes both. But want to give up on the inside. So I wanted to acknowledge the amazing people around the world who are putting themselves in the front lines to stop large fossil fuel projects and other polluting projects around the world that are risking bodily harm and arrest and other risks, being out in the elements and so on. And so we need these voices. But I'm going to be talking about an organization that's trying to do some things from the inside. And so that's called Citizens Climate Lobby is the group that I'm going to be talking about. We're a nonprofit, nonpartisan. We're a grassroots-oriented, volunteer-driven organization. And there's two main goals. The first one is to create political will for climate solutions, focusing on that. And the second goal is equally as important. It's actually to empower people to sort of reclaim their political and personal power. So many people with climate change is like, we're screwed, there's nothing we can do. Besides the denial, which is on one side, you get a lot of despair. And so this is a way to sort of bring in hope through actively working and engaging with our elected representatives. So I'm not going to be able to talk because of time constraints, but the founder of the organization's name is Marshall Saunders, and he's got a great story I can share with you later. But it was founded in 2007 in California with just a handful of chapters, and now each day you go to the website, there's a new chapter. There's currently 345 active chapters around the world. Most of those are in North America, in the U.S., and then Canada has about 25 active chapters. It's been in Canada, founded in 2010. There's a whole bunch of them in progress. That's the yellow, including chapters starting to grow around the world. And this isn't anything that CCL has done to try to get that. It's more that people around the world are hearing about Citizens Climate Lobby and want to bring that back to their communities. So there's now 30 countries with either active chapters or chapters in development. I'm including some exciting things in Africa and countries as diverse as Sweden and Nepal and Bangladesh and Panama. And Australia's got some things happening just in the last year or so, which is interesting. So it's a way for our voices to sort of be the balance to these special interests that are getting to our government. So one thing that we do, there's a lot of education for the volunteers, as well as connecting members. There's a monthly massive conference call where we all call in, and there's a guest speaker once a month. And it's really exciting when you hear where people are calling in from. They'll sort of shout their names out over about 5 or 10 minutes before the call starts. And there's hundreds of different chapters where people are meeting together in living rooms, and so a few hundred chapters calling in, and then there's 10, sometimes 20 people sitting around, all hearing the same thing and listening and getting updated on actions and things happening as well. So the main strategies that we use for building political will are lobbying, so meeting directly with our elected representatives, mostly on the federal level here in Canada and in the U.S. In the media, writing letters to the editor, op-eds, and any other way to get our message out so it doesn't get not heard. Sometimes the media has quite a bias towards the urgency of the issue, and also through outreach. And there's a couple of unique things about CCL's approach. One thing that's like the fundamental rule for CCL, and there's not a lot of rules, is that we come from a place of respect, admiration, and appreciation when meeting with our elected representatives. And this isn't like some sort of false flattery or anything. This has to be genuine. And when we meet with them, they know it's genuine. It's something that it doesn't have to be anything to do with climate change, but something that we can sincerely appreciate about the work that they've done. And most politicians actually go into the political sphere to make a difference and change the world with good intentions. And so it's amazing how just that little small thing can sort of shift the conversation. Sometimes if they think, you're going to be coming in here talking about climate change, especially if it's Republicans in the U.S. or conservatives here in Canada, they start out a bit prickly. And I've witnessed just, like a total relaxing and a change in the frame when they hear that we're not going to be confrontational. We also connect with shared values. So again, in meetings directly with our elected representatives, or in outreach, like what I was talking about with the woman who was 84 years old. I mean, there's some way to connect everybody with this issue. Nobody's going to get exempt from it. So finding shared values is really important to get the conversation for people that don't think it's an issue. We also are taught to practice deep listening skills. So when we're listening to others, not just have our mind set and that's it and that's the only way, because we're not going to get the conversation moving by just being like that. So the quote that we like is to say is to be interested instead of interesting. And we're nonpartisan, and we're working to overcome the partisan divide by finding policies that are going to be able to be acceptable for all political parties. We always work in teams, so our meetings, we have a sort of a specific format for our meetings, although we ad-lib as it goes, but we even have assigned roles. So one person's timekeeper, so not everybody has to think about that. Somebody that's going to do the gratitude statement or leave behind. So we have a good process. We're educated in advance, know who we're talking to and what their policies are. And we also have something called laser talks that are each month we get a couple of new ones, and for new people there's like a little packet you can look at, so that we are all sort of starting from the same factual knowledge. They're well referenced, and this actually helps us. So when we go into a meeting, we're not like trying to remember, oh my God, what's this, what's that? You kind of have things internalized already. There's some inspiration from Gandhi that we use in our education or our training, and so we're certainly inspired by some of his words of wisdom. And I'm just going to share you the story about when Gandhi met General Smuts in South Africa during his time there. And Gandhi, all of 5'4", told the imposing Smuts that he planned to oppose the Asiatic Registration Act of 1908. And Smuts looked at him and said, "Really? Anything else?" "Yes," replied Gandhi, "I will prevail." And so Smuts asks, "Oh, and how do you plan to do that?" And Gandhi says, "Well, with your help, of course." And so that's the kind of approach that we are hoping, and you kind of need that inspiration when you're going to ask a Republican, for example, to support a carbon tax. And there's another quote that I'm just going to leave you with as well that really does help inspire us as far as how to make those connections. "Experience has taught me that civility is the most difficult part of satyagraha." That's the passive resistance he was working on in South Africa at the time. "Civility does not here mean the mere outward gentleness of speech cultivated for the occasion, but an inborn gentleness and desire to do the opponent good. These should show themselves in every act." So those are values that we do strive to imitate. And this particular photo was from the year before last. I'm one of the little dots in there, where over 800 people came to do a mass lobbying days in Washington, D.C. And it's actually really inspiring. So besides meeting with our members of Congress or Parliament in our home areas, we also have mass lobbying days where we have lots and lots of meetings with different people. And I also wanted to share this quote from Joe Robertson that says, "You cannot wish your way to success. You need to study, learn, coordinate, and take action. But there is a fundamental difference between action that makes room for information provided by others and action that discounts all such information as useless. Respect is not a concession, it's a catalyst." And that's Joe Robertson, who is on staff at CCL. And at CCL, we're also strive to be for solutions rather than dwell on what we're against. And there's a lot of things to be against, so I'm not saying that's easy. But what we are working on is fair and effective climate pricing, a policy called carbon fee and dividend, and I'll be happy to talk about that later on. But just wanted to put that out there, that we have a policy proposal that we go to talk about and find connections. What are things that you like about it, what not, and oh, right. So what are some impact? What are some what's the results of all this work. Well, one thing that is exciting is this, just in February, Climate Solutions Caucus was formed in the House of Representatives that's bipartisan, and Citizens Climate Lobby had responsibility for getting this going. And so the two men in the upper left corner are South Florida congressmen. One's a Republican and one's a Democrat, and they started this bipartisan caucus together. And you can only join if you find somebody from the other party to join with. And so now, just as of this month, it was just announced there were 2 new ones. There's 20 members, and this is, I mean, it's exciting that means that there's 10 Republicans in an election year willing to say climate change is important, because the Republican platform outwardly is not, we all know what that is. I showed those slide before. The one thing is, behind closed doors, the Republican offices that we've met with, they're actually acknowledge climate change is real and it's an issue. And if you've ever been to Washington, D.C. and met with staff, they're all young. They're all like under 30. And those are young people. Young people get it. They know it's an urgent issue. And so the thing is that those politicians have boxed themselves into corners, and how to let them come out of that corner without us grandstanding and saying, see, but to all of us work together on climate solutions is the issue that I'm really passionate about. And another success story is there's a project called the Endorsement Project, and asking leaders, so the grass tops in the community, support either that carbon fee and dividend as an option, or at least climate action for addressing climate change. And so hundreds of endorsement letters, and this is mostly going on in the U.S., have happened from leaders in communities and faith groups and so on. And then even some cities, so city of Philadelphia, San Francisco, Salt Lake City, and other cities. Oh, and there's a lot of smaller cities, and I just pulling up Boone, North Carolina as an example, so it's not all in sort of progressive, necessarily thinking states. And then just this past month, there was an exciting thing where the California legislature actually is asking Congress to tax carbon and give the revenue to the households, which is what carbon fee and dividend is. And so that was a pretty major score. And and the executive director, Mark Reynolds, says that in 2017 we're going to have a bill that places a fee on carbon and returns the revenue to the household. So we're optimistically working and not going to give up in the face of a lot of sort of people that want to just give up on the process. And lastly, there's a lot of things happening in Canada as well. We're meeting with our MPs from all political parties. And we've had in private meetings support from conservatives and liberals, NDP, Green Party, and in fact, carbon fee and dividend is in the Green Party platform because of CCL's work. We're keeping the conversation alive in the media and in outreach. We're sending letters to elected leaders, and I've got a postcard campaign if anybody is interested in talking to me about BC Focused. We also participated in climate town halls that happened around the country. And we're also watching closely as Canada is developing a climate action plan. And and I'll leave you with this little quote about all of you doing amazing work on trying to make it a better world, is remembering to savor it as well as save it. So thank you, and I'm sorry if I went over.